Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 106th anniversary of the Gallipoli landing and the 14th anniversary of Guildford dawn service. The dawn service is aimed not at glory of warfare, but the thank you of the hardship and loss of life that was endured and done by our men and women of all the armed services. Since the Gallipoli landing, with the conflicts that have happened around the world, we have lost over 100,000 men and women in the defence of this country and the countries around the world. And Anzac Day is a thank you for their effort, for what they went through and what they attained in the freedom of other nations, our nation and other nations. But there's more to Anzac than Anzac Day itself. Anzac Day does not condone or glorify warfare, but a means of saying thank you to all our men and women who have done so much for this country and other countries around the world, as I said. There was a lot more went on behind the scenes, which a lot of us have not seen. We see the troops coming home at the end of the war, being welcomed by joyful multitude, but it was the people who come home also without no welcome. I can remember as a 11-year-old and a friend of mine who was much the same age in our street, his uncle had come home at the end of 1945 from 3.5 years in imprisonment as a POW in Changi and the Death Railway, etc. And he asked me if I'd come out with him, with the family when they went to visit him in, as I said, late 1945 at the Heidelberg Repat. And I can vividly remember walking into that hospital and this very, very long ward, and with a row of beds both sides of the ward, pristine made, and each with a person there, very brown, but big, dark, staring eyes. That as we walked up the aisle between the beds, they just looked at us as we went past and stared and followed us with their eyes. There was complete silence and no one was talking until we got to Uncle Wally's bed, and he burst out crying when he seen his sister and her husband, and they hadn't seen for 4 years or so, and he was completely different in attitude to what they remembered him and how he looked. And when he did come out of hospital, he was destined never to work again through the illness that he had suffered, and he spent 4 to 5 years walking around the streets, coming home for lunch and then disappearing again, and then he ended up back in hospital and so died. But it's those sorts of incidents and sufferings that people went through and was never a lot of people weren't aware of what happened to a lot of people other than what we read and seen on the news, movies, etc.
Of all the uncompromising landscape that faced the Anzacs in the days and weeks after the landing, this ridgeline was perhaps the toughest. The steep cliffs, tangled ravines and exposed gullies helped the Turkish defenders keep the invaders at bay. But it was here at Courtney's Post on May the 19th, 1915, a true Australian hero was forged. Albert Jacka was a 21-year-old Victorian forestry worker when the war broke out and, like so many of his generation, quickly answered the call to arms.
He was one of the first people among 300,000+ young Australians to volunteer. He was in the first wave. It's just that adventurous spirit that he had.
A private in the 14th Battalion, Jacka landed at Anzac Cove late in the day on April the 25th and was soon on his way to the front line. Courtney's Post, named after the battalion's commander, stands on the lip of the Monash Valley, about a kilometre in from Anzac Cove. A maze of trenches served as the Anzac's first line of defence. Australian soldiers perched precariously on the rugged hillside just metres from the Turks. The commanding heights, with a clear view of the coastline and the lower terrain, made it one of the most strategically important spots on the peninsula. And that's why, on the morning of May the 19th, a major Turkish assault was launched here to push the Australians back into the sea. During that attack, the Turks actually captured a section of the Australian trench here at Courtney's Post, and that's when they ran into Albert Jacka. Mike Kelly, what happened next?
Albert Jacka was in a communications trench right behind the front line, and instead of actually waiting for orders, he actually attacked one man over open ground into the trench himself and bayoneted the 6 or 7 Turks he actually found in there. He was found then by his commanding officer when they actually got into the trench, saying, "I've got the beggars, sir." So he's actually got in there and done the job himself and recaptured the trench single-handed.
An immensely brave act.
Extremely brave act. He's one of the bravest acts on Gallipoli and most deserving of the Victoria Cross.
For his daring exploits, Albert Jacka was awarded the Victoria Cross, the first Australian in the war to earn the highest military honour.
To me, he was just Uncle Bert.
Nearly 100 years on, Jacka's niece, Josephine Eastoe, still swells with pride when looking back on her uncle's heroics. A wall in her Melbourne home serves as a shrine to the VC winner.
Really, I could weep buckets when I read some of the stuff and, very emotional about it, really. So...
He was a very brave man, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And I think fearless is what he was. He didn't have any fear of whatever he did.
As news of Albert Jacka's Gallipoli gallantry spread, the shy, laconic Victorian became an instant celebrity.
He was a national hero. Everybody in Australia knew his name. Boys would think of him as the Australian Achilles.
Jacka's image was used on numerous recruiting posters to drum up volunteers, but he refused to go home to personally spruik the war effort.
He thought that if you got a Victoria Cross, that you had to stick with the men. You couldn't just rest on your laurels and go away. You had to stick it out and take the same chances as everybody else's.
And stick it out he did in spectacular fashion. His gallantry on the Western Front earned Jacka 2 more decorations, including the Military Cross. He received that long overdue hero's reception on arriving back in Melbourne at the end of the war. Jacka went on to marry and adopt a daughter. In 1930, he was elected Mayor of St Kilda. In January 1932, this fearless soldier who'd survived bullets and hand grenades was stricken by kidney disease. He was just 39 years old.
He gave me a penny when I was taken to see him, and when he actually died a couple of days later. And I thought, fancy him thinking what a great thing a penny did for a kid when I was a kid, because I can't tell you what you could buy for a penny in a lolly shop. And I couldn't get there quick enough the next morning to go to the lolly shop and spend that penny.
Nearly 6,000 people filed past Albert Jacka's coffin as he lay in state. The procession to St Kilda Cemetery was even bigger.
It was a massive, massive funeral, considering that the day that the funeral was on was 109 degrees. It was about 43.5 or something. There were bushfires all around Melbourne that day, and intense sunlight. And still 50,000 people came out for that funeral.
Every January, a commemorative service is held at Jacka's gravesite to honour this unlikely hero.
I am proud but sad that Bert died so young. I really am. And I think that's the most important thing that I feel for him, that he can't see all this that's going on in his memory right now.
Albert Jacka is like an exemplar of the Australian character that was the foundation of today's Australian character. It was a volunteer society, selfless mateship, all of those characteristics and values. I think he is someone that we should remember. We should not forget a person like Albert Jacka.
Ode to the fallen. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. But at the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we shall remember them, lest we forget. There will be a flag raising ceremony and a wreath laying ceremony at the Guildford Cenotaph at 7 a.m. It'll give everyone a chance who wants to lay a wreath, etc., and participate in that. But it also gives everyone a chance to say thank you, and we can only say it in what we mean and how we say it in the good old Australian way. Thanks very much, mate.